Welcome back to the Nourished and Free podcast. If you're here, it's because you probably love learning more about nutrition and general wellness. If you aren't already subscribed to this particular show, be sure you stick around for more episodes around the topics of not only nutrition and health, but specifically how we can foster a healthy relationship with those things as well as with our bodies. My name is Michelle Yates. I'm a registered dietitian with my master's in health psychology. I'm a certified health mindset coach. I really love talking about how to do those things. How do we create a healthy relationship with food and with our bodies and with exercise? And to support that, today's episode is going to be all about muscles, meaning the key things to consider when it comes to your mindset around approaching muscle growth, when you should care about it, why you should care about it, how to go about doing it, and how to prioritize it without slipping into disordered eating tendencies, obsession, or becoming an obnoxious bro body lifter. To bring insights into this conversation, we've got my friend Dr. Joey Muñoz on the show with us today. Dr. Joey is a nutrition science PhD and the founder of Fit for Life Academy. With a passion for evidence-based fitness and nutrition, which we love here, he helps individuals transform their health and achieve their dream bodies through sustainable, science-backed methods. Dr. Joey is dedicated to debunking common fitness myths and providing clear, practical advice that leads to lasting results. And I always appreciate his balanced perspective with things because he always brings a balanced approach to conversations around health and wellness and body composition. And especially in today's episode, I think you're going to see evidence of that, where it's this perspective of like, hey, we don't need to like kill ourselves over achieving the dream body, especially if it's just because you want to look a certain way. Like that can be really fleeting and not really bring you true joy or health or happiness. But at the same time, like we don't need to just completely forget pursuing health either and just be like lazy and be like, well, whatever, I'm just not even going to try. So I really love the way that he brings compassion and balanced perspective into really all things health and wellness, but particularly on this topic as well. I have always agreed with his perspective and his approach on things. So I'm excited for you to hear more from him. He's more of a specialist on fitness than I am. I'm kind of just like, I like fitness because I like fitness, but I wouldn't call myself a specialist. Like it's not what I dedicate my time to understanding more. So I always refer out for conversations like that. And I know this is going to be a really valuable episode for anybody interested in the topic. I'll put all of Joey's links into the show notes so that you know how to learn more from him and where to work with him. To learn more about working with me and my team, which you may want to consider if you find yourself stuck in a restrict, binge, roller coaster. Maybe you've been struggling with binging or closet eating for years or decades and have tried every single diet under the sun and you're feeling really sick of it and you just want out and you want to find a way to find peace with food and with your body and kind of like find the gray area instead of the all or nothing mentality when it comes to health and wellness. Then you'll find more about what our program, also called Nourished and Free, just like the name of this podcast, you'll find more about what that looks like in the show notes. Well, welcome to the show, Joey. I'm so glad to have you on my show officially.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's so good to see. It was a while ago since I was on yours, a few months, right?
At least. Yeah.
I feel like you have grown so much on social media since then. I was like trying to find your profile today to message you the link. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's growing so much. Like that is so awesome because I love seeing evidence-based accounts getting their information out and being seen by more eyes because as you know, there's a lot of accounts that have millions of followers and they are giving the worst information out there and advice. So anyway, excited for you. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So today I want to talk about the topic of building muscle, lean mass. I think it's something that we, especially when we're going through the process of healing our relationship with food and with our body and trying not to be so perfectionistic and all or nothing. And, as we're getting into more of the anti-diet world, I guess, we get kind of afraid to want to pursue building muscle because we're afraid. Sure. So that's what I see a lot of times with clients. Like there's this fear of, well, is that diet culture again? Is that slipping back into my old mentality where it's disordered and I want to have like a balanced conversation about muscle mass today where we can talk about the benefits of it and do that in a way where it's like, we're still taking care of your relationship with food though, and your relationship
Yeah.
with your body. Like, this is all in the name of caring for you, not to meet somebody's like expectations for you, I
Yeah.
guess. Like, this is truly a good thing for your health overall and your well-being. So yeah, with that being said, do you want to kind of dig into what the
Yeah.
benefits of having muscle mass are and building muscle, resistance training, all that? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, totally. And just to start off, like to set the tone, I think everything can be done in a positive way or in a harmful way,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I know this is something you talk about often. Like, dieting is not good nor bad. It depends
Hmm.
on how you approach it. It depends on your
Totally.
psychological relationship with how you're doing it as well. Same goes with any sort of fitness endeavor, trying to build muscle, whatever it is. And the same can be said for anything outside of like nutrition and fitness as well, right? Like
Yeah.
some people have a poor relationship with their work and need to be able
Yeah.
to manage that better. So everything, I'm not really a big believer of like good and bad, right? I think it all
Yeah.
depends on how you approach it.
I absolutely
And
agree.
what we try to do with a lot of our clients at Fit for Life is also help them improve their health and body composition in a healthy and sustainable way. And a big part of that for us is helping them optimize muscle mass, right? A lot of the people that come to us want to build muscle, but we really do it from a health focused perspective.
Love
And
that.
I think this is probably a great place to start the conversation because I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions is that building muscle is just for looks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not a bro or I don't care about bodybuilding, so why should I care about muscle mass? And that just couldn't be further from the truth, right?
Hmm.
And to also clear this up, when I'm talking about building muscle, I'm not talking about being a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about having adequate muscle for health, right?
Yeah.
Being strong, being physically capable. So, some of the obvious benefits of building muscle are improvements in physical function and quality of life as you age, right? What most people don't realize is that after the age of about 50, muscle mass tends to decline pretty quickly. Now, you can build muscle in your 50s and your 60s, but in reality, we achieve peak muscle mass in like our mid 30s. It's so important to prioritize muscle mass as we age. And by the way, guys, if you're listening, if you're in your 40s or 50s or even your 60s, like and you haven't started, it's not too late. You can always build muscle mass. You just build it at a slower rate when you're older. But as we age, I'm sure we all have family members or family friends who have had to go into assisted living facilities because they couldn't take care of themselves anymore. A big part of that is due to low muscle mass, low strength, low physical function, right? And so muscle mass becomes incredibly important as we age for those reasons. For me, like I don't want to be in my 70s or 80s and need help getting out of bed or bringing my groceries into the house or just doing activities of daily living, right? So that's one really important aspect of having muscle mass as we age. Beyond that, this goes hand in hand with bone mass as well, specifically in women. I feel like a big part of your audience are women, right? It's like
Yeah.
after
Definitely.
menopause, women lose a ton of bone mass, and it's mainly
Hmm.
due to the loss of estrogen. But we can combat that with resistance training, because the same way that lifting weights makes your muscles bigger, because you need bigger muscles to lift the weight, your bones become more dense as well because you need a denser bone to be able to resist that weight as well, right? Like if you put a bar on your back and you're doing squats and you slowly, gradually add weight to that, your bones become denser. And the reason why bone density is so important is because osteoporosis is a debilitating disease and it's unfortunately more
Hmm.
prevalent in women than it is men. But a large percentage of individuals over the age of 70 who fall and break a hip die within a year. And that's highly preventable, right? It's sad to see happen because it's something that can actually be prevented. So I would say those are some of the most obvious benefits of resistance training and focusing on building muscle. But beyond that, what people don't understand is that higher amounts of muscle mass, and again, when I say higher amounts of muscle, I'm talking about within a natural limit, right? We're not, again, talking about being a bodybuilder. But higher amounts of muscle mass is associated with a reduced risk of pretty much every chronic disease. Most people think that you have to do cardio for cardiovascular benefits, and cardio is great for cardiovascular benefits, but resistance training also has a great cardiovascular benefit. There's a reduced risk of all sorts of cardiovascular diseases, reduced risk of diabetes, reduced risk of age related cognitive decline, reduced risk of specific cancers. So we know that exercise in general is great, but I really do think that more people need to focus on optimizing muscle mass, right? Because most people know that you should run, you should be active, you should get your heart rate up, you should sweat. But very few people understand that building muscle, like beyond exercise, like actually focusing on building muscle is incredibly important for these health related outcomes as well.
Hmm. I feel like too, there's like this mentality of if you don't sweat or you don't get your heart rate up to a certain amount, then the workout was pointless or didn't do anything. And sometimes
Mm,
when you're resistance training, it can be more, um, I mean, it's going to be a little bit lower with your heart rate probably,
sure.
unless you're trying to do like a max or something. You might not sweat. So sometimes I like do an hour long workout and I don't really break a sweat, but it's like, was that pointless though? Because I was lifting heavy stuff, like, and that's a mentality I totally used to have was like, if I'm not sweating, then it was pointless. I didn't do enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people kind of, a part of the reason people neglect it sometimes, or they feel like it's not worth their time is because they just have this mentality of it's not working me hard enough, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to follow up there and say, like,
Yeah.
it's funny because that ties, first off, I was going to say, if you're not sweating in an hour of lifting, you're not pushing hard
Well, easy. Sometimes,
enough.
not every time.
No, but all jokes aside, it's funny because sweat is influenced by like your temperature as well, right? Like if you're in the
Yeah.
cold, you're probably not going to sweat much, even if
Right.
you're doing cardio. So it's like, and you could walk in the heat and that's not really hard exercise and you're going to sweat. So like sweat is just an indicator of your body regulating its core temperature. It has nothing to do
Hmm.
with the effectiveness of a workout. But I think that comes from this misconception of, or the idea that the purpose of exercise is to burn calories,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you're sweating, you're getting hot, you're burning calories, which also isn't true. Like you could sweat and not burn many calories. But, anyways,
Hmm.
what I try to tell my clients and try to get everyone to understand is that the purpose of exercise is not to burn calories and it's not to lose weight. Although exercise can aid in that, that's not the main purpose for exercise. In my opinion, the main purpose for exercise is to improve health related outcomes and improve your physical capacities, right?
Hmm.
Physical
Preaching.
capacities being strength, athleticism, cardiovascular endurance, right? All different types of physical capacities. And the exercise modalities that you do should be aimed at improving those with a focus on doing that, right? So if you're just like jogging for the sake of sweating or like putting on, what do people do, like put on garbage bags and stuff and like go run in the sun so they sweat more.
Or like
Sweating
multiple
more
layers of
doesn't mean
sweatshirts.
anything. Yeah. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think it's difficult for people, because most people start their relationship with exercise from the perspective of I'm going to exercise so I can lose weight.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, that's just, in my opinion, not the purpose of exercise whatsoever.
No, I think that's so good. So good to highlight. And that's like when my clients make that shift from exercise being about losing weight, which is inherently about them almost like punishing themselves, at least a lot of the times in the cases of the women I work with, they want to lose weight because they feel like they aren't good enough with the body that they have. And again, like there's a time and a place, like it can be done in a healthy way. But when it's coming from this place of like punishment and self hatred, then that's not sustainable, like it's so hard to continue on with something that you're doing out of a place of negativity rather than out of this place of like, I genuinely desire to be able to bring in my own groceries when I'm 75
Yeah.
or to not fall and break a hip, And I think that it's hard to put yourself in that long term state of mind, like we're as a culture so focused on the short term and the right now and the instant satisfaction that that can be a hard motivating factor for people to get behind because they're just like, I don't need to worry about that yet.
Yeah.
But
It
yeah,
creeps
I
up.
mean, it's something we should think about. What do you think are some more of those like immediate, not immediate, but more of the short term like benefits that we can get from resistance training, even
Yeah.
like mental health, like endorphins or anything like that you think would be good to know?
Yeah. And this is a really important topic because I think it's important to have like motivators to get people into the gym, right? And so some of the things that I get feedback from clients and like even the first 2 or 3 months is one, feeling stronger. Like it's really cool to feel stronger, right?
Yeah.
I work with a lot of individuals who are between like 40 and 60 years old on average. And I work with a lot of women who are like in their mid 50s. And I'm thinking of one client in particular. We actually just had a check in earlier today, and she was telling me, first off, she worked out in a sports bra for the first time ever. And she's like, wow, my back muscles look really cool. I've never seen that. She comes from a background of like literally doing hours of cardio and running because she always wanted to
Mhm.
lose weight. And we've been working on that. And so she sent me these pictures. She's like, look at my back. It looks awesome. And then she's like, but besides that, I was just at a baseball game with my granddaughter because her grandson plays baseball. And her granddaughter's like 35 pounds now. And she was like, and keep in mind, this lady is like in her definitely above 55. She's somewhere between 55 and 60. And she was telling me she was grabbing her 35-pound granddaughter and just like tossing her in the air up and down. And she wasn't thinking anything of it. But then she came to the realization, she's like, I wasn't really able to do that this is easily even like a year ago. And a year
Mm.
ago, the baby weighed even less, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, this is literally from lifting weights. So seeing yourself become physically stronger is super cool. I have another client in our group coaching program who has just started lifting weights about 4 months ago. And she's still learning a ton, but she's feeling herself getting stronger, right? And she was saying before she would be winded just from going up the stairs. And what people often
Mhm.
don't think of when they like get winded doing something really easily, like going upstairs, and they feel like it's their cardiovascular health. Oftentimes, it's just that they're really weak muscularly, and improving strength
Mm.
a little bit, like reduces your exertion on those movements substantially, right? Because if you
Yeah.
have low muscle strength, going up the stairs might feel like a really hard set of resistance training. Essentially, it is resistance training, right? You're just using your
Yeah.
body weight. And so if
Yeah.
you simply improve your muscular strength, that becomes substantially easier. Again, the grocery stuff, this was one that I hear all the time, just like carrying groceries becomes easier. So like your physical capacities start to improve, you feel stronger, things that felt difficult feel easier. That's really cool. Two, your body starts to respond pretty quickly as well. I think it's really cool to see some muscle definition, right? Like
Mhm.
it's empowering. It's like, man, I'm doing this thing and I'm seeing immediate results. That's, I think, a pretty immediate benefit. And this one goes hand in hand with the first one. And I think it's one of the things that I want to talk about in terms of like how to do this in a healthy way. But it's really celebrating like performance in the
Yeah.
gym, right? I feel like so many people, again, when it comes to exercise or nutrition, do it for the way they look
Yeah.
versus focusing on what their body can do. And it's like if you're following a structured resistance training plan and you're doing certain exercises and you see yourself getting stronger week after week after week, that's really empowering. I would say those are some of the main major benefits that I see people experience at the beginning.
Yes. It's so much more fun to just feel like, wow, I did that.
Yeah, and I was going to
That
say
I
it's a
did.
great stress reliever as well, but I think the
Yeah.
stress relief and more of the psychological benefits come with years of lifting. Because at the beginning, I'm not going to lie, it's pretty uncomfortable. It's
True.
hard, right? Like you have to really focus because you don't know how to do these exercises. And you mentioned earlier, like when you do cardio, you sweat a ton. Lifting is hard in a completely different way, right? It's like your lungs
Absolutely.
aren't on fire, but your muscles are on fire and everything's
Yep.
shaking and it's really hard. So I wouldn't say at the beginning, like lifting is a great stress reliever simply because it's stressful, right? That's the honest truth. But over time, it becomes way more therapeutic. It takes time to get there.
Yeah. And even like, so in the midst of that lifting session or workout, it can be very hard. And when you're done with that, though, like I feel like no
Yeah,
matter
very
where you're
rewarding.
at, there's that sense of accomplishment. There's that sense of like, I'm done. Like I get to be done with this today or for the week or whatever it is. And that was hard, but I did it. And there's that sense of, okay, I can do hard things. And I think that's always good for us to remember
Yeah.
because sometimes we forget and we get hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, love that. So many benefits, so many. Just putting it out there for anybody that's not strength training yet or lifting yet. Just just do it for a little bit and see how you feel, please. For me and Joey. Do you feel like there's any risks that we should talk about or mention when it comes to strength training or trying to build muscle?
Yeah. So under the umbrella of strength training, you could strength train in many different ways, right? And this is maybe a little bit nuanced and people don't know the differences, but you could do like bodybuilding style training, or you could do powerlifting, or you could do CrossFit, or you could do, there's a bunch of different ways to strength train, right? Strength train would just talk about exercising using weights. Um, Surprisingly, bodybuilding style training, and when I say bodybuilding style training, it's just training in a way that is optimal for muscle growth specifically, has the lowest risk of injury. Okay, so there's actual research on this in terms of like number of hours spent training, how many injuries occur. Bodybuilding has the lowest number of injuries, not just amongst strength sports, but general sports overall. It's funny because things like soccer, basketball, football have much higher injury risk. So overall, injury risk with lifting weights is relatively low, but the risk, I mean, there's always a risk if you don't really know what you're doing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important at first to definitely invest in a qualified professional to teach you how to do things, because yeah, if you're doing something and you're doing it incorrectly and you twist some sort of way that you shouldn't be twisting,
Mm-hmm.
you might get hurt. If you go into the gym and maybe you try to use weights that are a little bit too heavy, you might
Mm-hmm.
get hurt. Some of the biggest, mistakes that I see people make are doing things like not training through a full range of motion, or not controlling the weight, or not training with the appropriate tempo. And like, these are small little details that can significantly influence injury risk, right? So when I talk about training with a full range of motion, I mean doing an exercise through the entire range through which that joint can move, right? And I'm going to try to think of an example here. Let's say a push up. Everybody knows what a push up is, right? A full range of motion for a push up would be starting with your chest literally completely laying on the floor and then pushing all the way up to where you're fully extended, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's difficult for a lot of people. So what do? They start up top and they come halfway down and they go back up and they never go all the way down until their chest touches the floor, right? Well, when you're doing that, you're essentially training an exercise with more weight than you can actually handle, because you can't do it through a full range of motion with the weight that you're using. And in this case, with a push-up, it's your body weight. It's much better to probably start with just doing those push-ups on your knees and training them through a full range of motion. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
putting excess tension on your joints through a partial range of motion, and you're never strengthening those joints in different ranges of motion. So
Yeah.
it's little things like that that I think can quote unquote increase the risk of injury, but if done correctly, the injury risk is pretty low.
Yeah. That's really interesting about like the bodybuilding side of strength training being the low, but it makes sense because I feel like that
Yeah,
style of strength training is it's a lot
exactly.
slower and more
Bodybuilding style training is
intentional.
not focused on lifting as much weight as possible, even though that's what
Yeah.
people think. It's really about control, putting tension on the muscles, doing
Yeah.
movements correctly. Like, the more focus and control you have on movements, the, in theory, better it's going to be to stimulate muscle growth versus just throwing weight around. So in
Yeah.
general, I'm a huge fan of bodybuilding style training because it's safe, it's
Mm-hmm.
extremely effective for muscle growth. And I think, and a lot of the people that we work with, it biased population, it's finds it very enjoyable overall.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always been my favorite kind of strength training too. Is it's just I feel like it's more relaxed and in a way, whereas something more like a CrossFit classes it can be kind of stressful. Like, oh my God, I gotta get everything done in a
Yeah.
certain amount of time. And yeah.
Well,
Um,
I come from like a powerlifting background where I did powerlifting for a couple of years.
yeah.
And powerlifting, the focus of powerlifting is opposite to bodybuilding, where bodybuilding, you're trying to put as much tension as possible on the muscle. And the way you do that is by making exercises as difficult as possible. So
Yeah.
you use lighter weight because you do it in a way that's mechanically disadvantageous. And I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but something like powerlifting, you are trying to lift as much weight as possible. So you put yourself in a way, essentially, you're trying to do it in the most efficient way so you can lift
Mhm.
the heaviest load possible. So you move quicker, you limit range of motion, you essentially are trying to cheat, quote unquote, as much as possible within the rules, right? And when I
Mhm.
used to do that, I would literally get injured all the time
Mm.
because I'm just trying to throw the heaviest weight I possibly can
Mhm.
around, and that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another risk too that I kind of want to highlight just from my perspective is the risk of like your environment and, the people that you might be around when you're pursuing building muscle. And, some people can make it hard to have a healthy relationship with exercise or with food because there is like to your point, that mentality of it being all about how you look instead of performance or functionality. And then too, if that's your mindset, if that's your intention going into it, then I think your risks, like, in a way, they increase because there's this different
Sure.
mentality that's more easily, it's more vulnerable to trying things that maybe aren't as safe and pushing yourself really hard to an unsafe degree, like I used to do 2 a days on 1,000 calories a day, like just insane stuff like that, because my mentality was aesthetic focused instead of what's the best thing for my body, what's the most, like, how can I improve my performance and function. It was not about that at all, and I was pushing myself too much.
Yeah.
um, so I want to highlight that too, because
Yeah.
if you find yourself experiencing that, that's a very real thing. Like, that's where the intention is so important. Back to what we were saying in the beginning, it's not like good or bad, it's just, what is your mindset going into this? What is
Yeah.
your intention and your motivation? Are you in a healthy spot mentally to do something like this physically?
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
from what you mentioned, some of those risks can be mitigated based off the community you expose yourself to, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Because there are a lot of gyms that are gyms with just weights, but it's not like a bodybuilding gym, right? Like a UFit or a Planet Fitness or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually a little bit of an older crowd, people who are just there to be healthy, lift some weights. And by the way, I also want to emphasize, I don't know about your take on this. Like, I'm not against people having aesthetic goals either, right? Like,
I think it can be done well.
yeah, exactly, if done in a healthy fashion. And I bring this up because my background, like when I started doing this stuff, was same as you, literally just for aesthetic goals.
Yeah.
And I've never had an eating disorder or anything like that, but like I definitely have had a poor relationship with food, and it used to impact the things that I would do, and it would impact, like, if I ate something and I thought I ate too much, I would feel bad about it unnecessarily. I would do X amounts of exercise the next day. So
Yeah.
I've been there, right? I was young, but I've gone through that, and I always say that fitness was the thing that really helped me. And
Yeah.
what I mean by fitness is like changing my mindset from nutrition and exercise simply being to look a certain way to like performing a certain way,
Yeah.
right? So, and I know everybody's different, but I'm very competitive, and I like even competing just against myself. So
Yeah.
I track my workouts, and if I see myself getting a little bit stronger, that to me is addictive, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
I chase the things that make me stronger and perform better. And
Mm-hmm.
inherently, the things that make me perform better are relatively healthy behaviors, right? It's not starving myself, because if I'm not eating enough, I'm not going to perform well in the gym. So it's eating enough.
Right.
It's making sure I have a pretty well balanced and healthy diet, because if I don't, and my digestion is shitty and my stomach hurts, I'm not going to perform well.
Yeah.
It means not drinking alcohol on the weekends because I need to get sleep and I need to recover. It means prioritizing
Yeah.
my sleep. And so
Yeah.
for me, like, fitness was almost like the gateway to then prioritizing all these healthy behaviors. And I think after like
Yeah.
15 years of doing this stuff now, I'm in a much different place where some of the stuff that we were sharing earlier with, like, I personally think fitness is the reason why I have so much success in different areas of my life. And not
Mm.
that I'm ridiculously successful or anything like that, but I think it's taught me a lot of lessons that are
Mm-hmm.
hard for people to understand unless you've been doing this for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? For example, like with business or with relationships, learning the importance of delayed gratification is really important, right? Like, there are things that you're going to put a ton of effort in and barely see any results, and it's going to
Yeah.
take time to see the fruit of your labor.
Yeah.
That is what lifting teaches you, in my opinion.
100%.
At the beginning, you make really fast results. After 15 years, I barely see any progress in the gym, but I still keep doing it because I love it. But you learn that skill. You learn the skill of doing hard things, as you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yep.
lifting and pushing your limits and learning how to do that consistently is really hard. Like, a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
and now I go to the gym because I truly want to go, but for years it's like a mental battle to go to the gym, because you know how hard that workout is going to be, especially when you're really pushing your limits. And I think those skills have translated for me over to business and relationships. It makes me a more calm person. Like,
Yeah.
maybe this is just me, but when I see people that are really like, I don't know, this is going to be controversial, but people who are like not calm and maybe very antsy and stuff, I'm like, man, you need to go work out and push your body really hard, because I feel like
Mm.
some of those things help change the way you are a bit. But anyways, that's just been my experience so far.
Well, it's like your ability to cope with stress can
Yeah,
kind of changes, because when you're exercising and lifting really hard, you're putting yourself through
through a
stress
lot of stress.
willingly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love that you brought that up because I think it's so true. It's just like that ability to teach you how to be resilient and to persevere through things that, like, they're not always fun. They're not always satisfying in the moment. But again, like, we're thinking about the long term. We're not thinking about what's going to make me feel good right now,
Yeah.
even though it might make you feel good. But
And
yeah.
I think there's just a benefit, and you don't have to do this through lifting, but lifting can offer this. I think there's just a massive benefit to intentionally doing hard things on a regular basis,
Hmm.
like things that you don't want to do,
Yeah.
right? Like, I say I love lifting. I love the benefits I get from lifting. But when I have to do a hard set, I'm not saying I love this. It's like
Yeah.
really
Totally. Yeah.
exhausting, right? And I
Yeah.
think that allows me to sit on my computer at 7 in the morning when I don't want to and look at my to-do list and just start, right? I
Yeah.
think that allows me to be more present with family when I'm exhausted and I don't want to do certain things. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that crosses over into a little bit more of the philosophical stuff that takes time to
I'm all
realize.
about that though. And I think that's so true. And it's so good to, and talking about benefits of this, like, here's a really awesome one, is that it builds character and
Yeah.
perseverance and resilience.
It's funny, Michelle, because you mentioned earlier, like people who are super into bodybuilding and all this stuff. But at least from my experience, at any gym or any person that I've talked to who is obviously really advanced in their fitness journey, who's like in great shape, really strong, has a ton of muscle, with few exceptions, those tend to be some of the nicest people.
Hmm.
Like, and it's funny because sometimes those people look scary.
Hmm. It's so
Because they're
true.
intense, but they're just like so
Yeah.
nice, so helpful. They tend to have great personalities
It's so
overall.
true.
Obviously, there are exceptions, but I do
Hmm.
think part of that is developed through just doing something hard on a regular basis and dedicating yourself
Yeah.
to committing to doing something difficult.
Yeah. That's so true. They are intimidating to look at, but some of the nicest people. So let's kind of dip into the nutrition side of things.
Sure.
What are some takeaway things that people can focus on nutrition wise that's not going to drive them crazy or make them feel like super stressed out to
Yeah.
help them support the resistance training, strength training, and build muscle?
Yeah. So the first and most important thing overall, which goes in line with live nourished and free, is to nourish your body. Like, you need, first and foremost, you need to eat enough, right? If you
Yes.
don't eat enough, you're not going to see improvements in body composition in terms of building muscle. Why? The analogy I like to use is like, people think that lifting weights builds muscle, and it doesn't. Lifting weights is just the signal or the stimulus to tell your body, hey, build muscle,
Mm.
right? It's like building a house and having the blueprint. Like, the blueprint doesn't build the house, it just tells you what to do, right? And then you need the building blocks, the cement, the bricks, whatever. I don't know how to build a house, but you need the adequate nutrition and adequate nutrition is not the only factor. Sleep's really important as well, stress management, all those things. But those are essentially the building blocks, right?
Yes.
Because straight up, like, your food turns into muscle, right?
Hmm.
And if you aren't consuming sufficient food, there's no excess food for your body to prioritize muscle growth. So the most important thing is just eating enough. So that would be first and foremost. Then I would say focusing on protein consumption. And if we talk about how much protein you should be eating, there's so much debate around this, and it's so silly because it doesn't need to be an exact number. But in general, if you can aim for at least zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8 grams per pound of body weight or pound of ideal body weight, that's going to be
Mm.
sufficient, right? Like, I weigh around 215 pounds. I aim for around 190 to 200 grams of protein per day. And I just do that consistently. And an easy way to do that, comes down to changing eating behaviors, but it's really just focusing your meals around protein as much as possible. I think people take this a little bit overboard when they just like only put protein on their plate. But just make sure you have an adequate amount of protein on your plate, right?
Yeah.
I would say for most people, if you have 3 solid meals, having a 4 ounce portion of protein on your plate is probably a very reasonable start.
Hmm.
And then maybe if you have a snack or something, trying to get another 20 grams or something like that of protein with a snack. Obviously, these are very generic recommendations. It depends on everybody's, like, what your weight is, what your size is, and what your fitness level is. But in
Right.
general, that's probably a good start.
Yeah.
And then beyond protein, if we're talking about just body composition specifically, I do think if we take it a little bit beyond that, focusing on consuming mainly whole foods is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Simply from like digestion and general health perspective as well. Like
Yeah.
I've noticed I'm not you know my content, but maybe the people listening don't. Like I don't demonize any foods. I think it's fine to have whatever you want as long as you're eating things within moderation and you're focusing on healthy behaviors and
Mm-hmm.
you have an overall healthy diet. It's not that big of a deal, right? But
Right.
I have realized that when I tend to be a little bit more laxed with my diet and I eat out more and I eat things that are a little bit more processed and a little bit more a little bit higher in fats in general, my digestion just feels off,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel a little bit more bloated. I feel a little bit more uncomfortable. And that plays a role because it impacts my ability to perform well in the gym. And in order to build muscle, you need to perform well because you need to progress, right? You need to slowly add more weight and get stronger. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
not performing well because your stomach doesn't feel great, and that
Yeah.
happens frequently, that could, in theory, impact your ability to progress. I wouldn't say that's a direct variable, but that's one that anecdotally I've experienced myself does play a
I feel
small
like
role.
it can affect energy levels too, like the quality of your diet, which obviously makes it harder to go do
Yeah.
a hard workout.
Yeah. In general, when I focus on things like having more consistency with my diet in terms of like meal timing and making sure I'm eating mostly minimally processed foods and including at least a serving or two of veggies with most of my meals, I just feel good, right? I just feel good. And then that translates into being able to perform well in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that I
Absolutely.
wouldn't say is like a direct effect, but definitely an indirect effect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And like key focus on like this being most of the time. Like, again, we don't need to be a perfectionist here and never have a processed food again or
Yeah.
only eat stuff that you grow out of your own garden in the backyard. Like,
Yeah.
good luck with that. Awesome if you do that. Teach me
Yeah.
your ways. But that's not like the requirement here in order
Yeah.
to build muscle or in order to be healthy. Like, there's ways that you can do this and you can work it into your life that it shouldn't feel like it's consuming all your time and energy to make this work into your life.
Yeah. And if I could add one more thing, because
Mm-hmm.
it's sometimes easy to forget the things that people think of when they're first starting off because that was so long ago for me and for you, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and what I was going to bring up is because when so many people start like looking up things about lifting or nutrition for lifting, they'll immediately start seeing things about like pre-workout nutrition and what you should be eating through your workout and what you need to
Yeah.
drink a protein shake immediately after your workout and you have to do this at this exact time. Guys, none of that matters. None of it. Like eating around your workout may have like a 0.05% benefit and it only matters when you're more advanced. It really does not
Yeah.
matter. The
Yeah.
only thing I would, because for example, like post-workout nutrition, you must have 30 grams of protein within an hour of your workout because of the anabolic window. It's not true at all. And if you're getting total adequate protein throughout the day, it doesn't matter whether or not you have protein immediately after your workout. There's research on this. It
Mm.
literally doesn't matter. The only thing I would encourage people not to do if they want to focus on building muscle optimally is to not train fasted. Because we do
Yeah.
know that consuming food prior to training does improve performance. And as I mentioned earlier, the number one driver of helping you build muscle is going to be progression in the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing for progression is performance. You need to be performing well. And what I mean by performing well, it doesn't mean like how strong are you compared to somebody else? It's just how well are you performing compared to your best,
Yeah.
right?
Are you improving?
Exactly. If you're not feeling your best, you're not going to perform that well that day. And even though it might
Yeah.
feel difficult that day, it's not stimulating progress as much as it could compared to
Mm-hmm.
feeling better. So that was like the digestion thing that we were talking about, energy levels, but also consuming food prior to training. This doesn't mean having a massive meal right before you work out, but like if you like working out in the morning, even having something as small as like a banana, just so you have some carbohydrates to help
Mm-hmm.
fuel training, it's going to be extremely beneficial.
It is such a game changer. I used to buy into that where I thought that like I would be in the fat, quote unquote, fat burning zone if I lifted or exercised fasted, So I
Yeah.
would do it first thing in the morning because it's like miserable to wait till 3 o'clock in the afternoon to
Yeah.
eat. But yeah, like you're exhausted. It's so hard. And I accidentally did this a couple of weeks ago where I did a morning workout and for whatever reason I hadn't eaten yet and I was like, this is so hard today. Why is this so hard? And then I had a interruption because of my tiny children and was able to get some breakfast in, and then I went back to finish my workout, and it was like night and day difference. I was like, wow, this is like, I
Yeah.
feel good. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, don't force yourself to train fasted based on these arbitrary rules, because it might actually be inhibiting your progress.
Yeah.
But yeah, the eating protein within 30 minutes of working out was definitely something that I thought was legit for a long time, and I had to
Me too.
correct myself. It
I
sounds
used
very
to
legit.
I used to go to the gym. This was back when I was like 16 or 17 years old. I used to go to the gym, and it wasn't just about the post-workout protein. It was also about consuming simple carbs so you can shuttle that protein into your muscles. Like that's what it was all about. So I would go to the gym with my little shaker cup and a scoop of protein powder in there, and
Oh
I would
yeah.
put some Gatorade powder in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle, like at the moment I finished my last set of the workout, I would run to the water fountain, fill it up, and just like chug it. I'm like, it needs to be immediate. It's like thinking back on it now, it's so silly. But I was committed.
Oh yeah, you were just chasing after those goals, man.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to circle back to is that you mentioned the ideal protein limit is, or range is, about 0.7 to 0.8 grams per pound. Now, keep in mind when we see protein recommendations, sometimes it's listed as grams per kilogram,
Sure.
sometimes it's listed as grams per pound. So you're going to see a huge variation in the numbers if you're not paying attention to that unit there. But one thing I wanted to highlight is that it is a range. And I think a lot of times we get very set on this goal number that we have to hit every single day. You know, maybe we pick the upper limit, we do 0.8 per grams per pound. And there can be this sense of like, if I don't hit that number, then I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is what I see all the time. Like, well, I didn't reach my goal. So I just like said F it and ate all the food that I wasn't supposed to eat. You know, it's that all or nothing mentality. So, from your experience and your knowledge, is there a need to be perfect every day with hitting these protein goals, or is there leeway? Are you still able to build muscle if there's a day where you maybe don't get as much in as you did the day, or
Yeah, of
as you were
course, of
trying to,
course.
you know, like, or you
Yeah.
end up missing a workout?
Yeah, of course, right? Like I would say, like do your best to consistently eat adequate protein.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're consistently like if every other day you're not eating any protein, like that's definitely going to have an impact on your ability to progress and build muscle. But it's not like all or nothing, right? It's not like if you didn't hit point 0.8 and you hit 0.79, you didn't build any muscle that
Mm-hmm.
that day or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. It's a continuum, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, in theory, if we're being objective, if you're eating less protein, maybe your ability to stimulate muscle isn't as great, and you might build slightly less muscle. And I emphasize the word slightly because it's not a big difference, guys.
Mm-hmm.
But like one day here or there is obviously not going to make a difference at all. Like I'm all with you. Like you don't have to be perfect with it. What I'm a big fan of is like being consistent and doing your best.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're truly doing your best and you're actually staying consistent, it's not a big deal if you miss a day here or there every once in a while. But what I do like to talk to clients about is like the importance of prioritization, right? Because I think something that also puts people in this state of limbo and unhappiness is like being in cognitive dissonance of like wanting to achieve something but not doing the things to do to get there. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, obviously, there are a number of different reasons, but sometimes people are just like aren't truly putting their best foot forward,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's another conversation for another day. But if you're doing your best, eating sufficient protein most days, falling short every once in a while is not a big deal at all, and you literally won't tell the difference in terms of your results.
Yeah, I love that, because I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do the absolute best every single day, even if you're on vacation or you have a
Yeah,
death in
yeah.
the family, or like,
That's
you know,
something, Michelle, because you and I have talked about this too. I think we talked about this on my podcast where it's like we don't want people to go through these things and these experiences because we've been through them and they suck, right? Like
yeah.
they take joy away from the thing that should be most important. Like if you're on vacation with family and you're worried about the fact that you couldn't get enough protein, like that sucks, right? Like you can't just
Mm-hmm. It
enjoy the
does.
vacation.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much of that is almost necessary to get to a better place as well. Like it is a journey, right?
Mm.
And having guidance through that, because anybody who starts on a particular like fitness related journey and they learn that they should eat enough protein well, that's going to be on their mind. And if they go on vacation, they can't get protein, like,
Yeah.
oh, but I should be eating enough protein. And slowly those things improve over time, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. There can be this like sticking point, I guess, where it's very uncomfortable. You're like, oh gosh, like I'm trying to prioritize this goal, but I'm not finding it easy to meet this goal right now. But at the same time, that can help you problem solve
Yeah.
and figure it out for the future and problem solve your own emotions around it too.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like as much as we try to prevent all of those negative things from happening, sometimes they are really helpful lessons to learn to get you to the other side where it's not negative. It's something that's just like a part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily preventing those things, but having the right guidance to do those things is really helpful.
Yeah.
Right. Because if they have
Yeah.
somebody tell you, like, hey, it's not that big deal, don't worry about it. And that's probably it for that person, right? But if you have somebody else
Yeah.
tell you the complete opposite, like, nah, bro, you have to get your protein, or like
Yeah.
that's
That's
not going to
so
be helpful either.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have guidance that is either so harmful or so
Yeah.
helpful. And you gotta be picky about who you work with. Speaking of, how can people find you and work with you if they want to focus more on building muscle and getting swole
Yeah, sure.
with Dr.
So
Joey?
if you guys want to follow me on social media, it's just at Dr. Joey Muñoz, pretty much everywhere. My podcast is the Dr. Joey Muñoz Show because I'm not original and I couldn't think of a better name. And if people want to learn a little bit more about what we do, will links just be down in the description, Michelle?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Don't worry about going on my website and inquiring about anything. I give out a free ebook that will teach you a little bit more about these things. And if you download my ebook, I'll also send you some emails that teach you a little bit more about these things, specifically with like optimizing nutrition and training for muscle growth. And I'll just say the link, but I'm sure they'll just go down below. It's just fitforlifeacademy.health/blueprint. And that's it.
Love it. Love it. And be sure that you guys do follow him on social media because a lot of what we talked about today was very focused on like the strength training and all of that. But Joey's content is so great at just like your classic myth busting of nutrition. And like there's so many great reaction videos. You're going to love it. It's like the best. And I also feel like you're very calm and chill when it comes to this stuff. And a lot of the reaction videos are like almost annoying because people get hysterical and they get defensive and triggered. And you're always just like very chill and balanced, like even just like laughing at them, like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, I just love your approach.
It's funny because I try and like, I don't think I'm being chill, but it's so funny because that's the feedback I get from everybody. I'm like, sometimes I record videos, I'm like, I'm trying to like invoke an emotion. And it's just, I guess somebody commented the other day, they were like, I didn't know you could be screaming at somebody so relaxed or something like that. Or like,
no,
I
that's
didn't know you could
honestly
scream
so
while
you.
whispering or something like that. I'm like,
no, that is so you, like that. And I think
low
that's
key
why,
roasting me in the comments.
yeah. But that's why your content is, I think, so it can be a breath of fresh air because you do have that calmer disposition. And honestly, like people are tired of being screamed at on the internet. So yeah.
Well,
anyway, you're a great follow and also just a professional I respect. And so if you want to work with Joey, I highly recommend it. At least get on his email list and learn from him because he's a smart guy and one of the good ones. So thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you and your time.
Awesome, Michelle. Thank you so much. We'll chat soon.
Chat soon.